What is it that makes the Lakehouse architecture the next big thing in data management? And can it really revolutionise the way that we handle data? Well, today on Tech Talks Daily, I'm joined by Ori Rafael, CEO and co-founder of a company called Upsolver. And my guest today is going to guide us through the intricacies of data lakehouses and highlighting why this new architecture is gaining traction over traditional data warehouses. We'll do it all in a language everyone can understand. And we'll also explore those key advantages of lakehouses, the challenges that come with transitioning to that architecture, and how data ingestion differs in lakehouses too. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where we attempt to uncover the potential of lakehouses and Upsolver's role in enabling an innovative approach to data management today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
I am Ori Rafael. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Upsolver.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you join me on the podcast. And every single day on this show, what I try and do is demystify technology and things that business leaders might have heard about, but maybe find them a little bit daunting and overwhelming and a little too complex. So to set the scene for our conversation today, can you explain what a lakehouse is and why it's considered the next big thing in data management?
So the lakehouse is the deconstructed warehouse. What does it mean, deconstructed? It means that you're taking the main components, which are storage, metadata management, which is done in a catalog, and queries, and basically separate them into different pieces. So if I'm a customer and I want to use the lakehouse, I can keep my storage just on S3 and manage my metadata in an Iceberg catalog. And then I can basically decide which warehouse engine I want to run on top of that data. But the idea of the lakehouse is basically to free companies from the warehouse vendor locking, which some people are thinking about, well, this can save me some money. But other than just saving some money, it can also allow you to use a multitude of tools. And for example, if you want to use a better tool for AI than your current warehouse, you are able to do that. So it supports the AI movement very well, and it reduces the cost of the warehouse by quite a lot.
And for any business leader listening, hearing about this for the first time, what would you say are the main business advantages of a lakehouse compared to, let's say, those traditional data warehouses?
The number one would be cost. So when I'm going to write into a warehouse, I basically need to pay for an ETL that's writing into the warehouse, and I need to pay for a warehouse cluster that needs to be up in order for me to write the data. So once you're writing data and in a way that disconnected from the actual warehouse, you're basically building a file system, you only need the ETL piece. So you're saving all the money that you used to spend on keeping warehouses clusters up for ingestion. That would be cost reduction number one. Cost reduction number two would be the fact that you keep less copies of your raw data. So many companies have a lake where they keep all their raw data, and then they keep another copy of the exact same data in the warehouse for that data to be queryable. Once you're building a lakehouse, you're unifying those two copies. Your staging area becomes your querying area. So you have one less copy of all your data. That's cost reduction number two. And cost reduction number three is the fact that in a warehouse, every time you want to do an update or a delete, that's a very heavy operation. They're using a method called copy on write, which means that you need to do a full table scan every time you're going to do an update or delete. And in the lakehouse, using formats like Iceberg, you're able to apply a method called merge on read, which means that you're not doing a full table scan every time you're doing an update or delete. So you can write in real time into the warehouse and not pay for constant full table scans, which is a big problem for warehouse companies. But those three are immediate cost reductions. You can add to that the fact that you have more leverage, more in talking to your warehouse vendor, because you're no longer locked to that vendor. You can just work with another vendor on top of your data. So cost reduction is a big piece. There was a recent survey saying that enterprises are expecting to save more than 50% of their analytics cost by moving to an open lakehouse using formats like Iceberg. And I think that's telling you why Iceberg is so hot at the moment. And reason number two is that the idea of one warehouse solving all your use cases doesn't hold, especially with everything happening in AI. I grew up in the Oracle world. I remember kind of the feeling of trying to shoehorn the database into the use case that's not a good fit for that. And with the open Lakehouse, you're basically able to use one engine for BI, one engine for AI, and basically more any other type of engines that you want, and for any additional use cases you want to do, because your data is no longer locked. Those are the main advantages.
And when you said the word cost reduction, followed by listing 3 ways of making immediate cost savings, I'm sure I could almost hear light bulb moments going off all around the world. But the question is, when somebody embarks, or an organization embarks on a journey like this, what are the main challenges that organizations face when transitioning from a data warehouse to a Lakehouse architecture?
I think that let's think about it from the perspective of the customer. I'm just going to replace my warehouse storage layer and everything will be fine. It's not something that they think about. That probably they think, okay, what's going to happen to my queries? Are they going to work as fast as they are working on the warehouse? I think that's a main concern that I'm hearing from customers, that the warehouses are doing a lot of optimization on their native storage layer to provide a certain level of performance. Will I get the same thing on top of Iceberg and on top of Lakehouse in general? And I think question number 2 is how am I going to manage access to my data? So if the warehouse is not my catalog, what is my catalog, and how do I enforce access control to the data? Those are the 2 main questions, I think. Comparing this to a warehouse migration, this is a much easier lift compared to a warehouse migration, because let's say I'm going to replace my warehouse A with warehouse B. In many cases, I need to change the syntax. A lot of things need to change, and it's for a 4-year project to replace a warehouse. But in this case, we are only replacing the underlying tables. I can continue using the same warehouse for queries. So the query world is not being impacted. So it is a migration, but it's a much easier one. I just need to create a new table and replace that with my old table. It's not a very hard thing to do, but still requires a little bit of time.
And I'm curious, how does data ingestion differ in a Lakehouse environment in terms of things like scale, table management, and storage systems when compared to those traditional warehouses too?
Well, I think that the concept of ingestion is still similar, with one big difference. When you're doing Lakehouse ingestion, I don't need a warehouse to be up. So let's say that right now, this is happening to a lot of our customers. You found something is wrong. Like you've been writing bad data into your warehouse. You want to fix it. How are you going to fix it? You're going to delete the bad data from the warehouse. And now you want as fast as possible to replay historical data into your warehouse. And so you'll have the missing data completed again. Now, if you're going to do that, now you need this huge warehouse cluster. You need to go and let your data, the DBAs, change the cluster size. And there you're creating a lot of stress on the warehouse. So every time you write, you basically need to think, what are the implications on the warehouse, performance side, and cost-wise? When you're doing ingestion into the Lakehouse, there is no warehouse up. Your only system that needs to be available is Amazon S3 or any other type of object storage, which is basically infinitely scalable. So the fact that you can do ingestion at any scale without thinking of what's going to happen to the warehouse is a very big advantage for the Lakehouse approach. And you know what? I said one thing, but I'll add the second thing, which I previously mentioned. When you ingest into the Lakehouse, you can apply the merge on read technique and not just the copy on write, meaning that you can get real-time data into the warehouse or to the Lakehouse without paying a huge cost for doing that, without doing constant table scan, which is also an advantage for the ingestion side.
It's incredibly cool what you're doing here. And this feels like a perfect opportunity to discuss Upsolver. And there will be people listening around the world that are hearing about you for the first time. So could you tell me a little bit more about Upsolver, the kind of problems that you're solving for them, and maybe even provide a few examples of how Upsolver's technology is helping companies overcome some of the challenges that we've discussed today, especially associated with implementing a Lakehouse. Can you introduce everyone listening to Upsolver?
Yes. So I think that the easiest way to explain it to your listeners is that Upsolver is the combination of ETL meets lake management. So if I have an ETL solution that doesn't have lake management, that's great for the traditional warehouse. I just write the data. The warehouse is going to manage the file system. It's not something that I, as the ETL vendor or the customer, need to think about. But if I'm going to write into the Lakehouse, I am as the customer responsible for managing and optimizing that layer for performance. So now this is a huge burden that goes on the customer. ETL vendors don't have a solution for that because they don't manage file system, but Upsolver does. So we both write or ingest into your tables, but we also optimize the file system in a way that's going to be, so you're going to have interoperability. You can work with any warehouse that you want, and the performance that you're going to get is going to be similar to what the warehouse provides on its own native tables. So Upsolver actually has two products because of that. You can just use the ingestion. You can just use the lake management, regardless of what you use the ETL, and you can use the combination of both.
So, and I'm curious, because you're right in that the heart of all this. You're seeing so many big changes, especially with the emergence of AI over the last couple of years, and how everyone's gone crazy about that. So what trends do you see emerging in the data management space, and how are you at Upsolver positioned to address some of these trends that you're seeing emerging?
I think that the strongest trend so I'm not going to talk about all the trends within AI. Of course, that AI is completely exploding and it's creating the demand for what we are doing, but we live one story below, closer to the infrastructure. And the biggest trend, and we've been waiting for a few years for that trend to happen, is the transition into open lakehouse and specifically Iceberg. So there was a fight between the different open table formats, Delta and Iceberg and Woody, and Iceberg seems to be the clear winner. And every vendor you're going to ask me about is either supporting Iceberg is its number one format or is it number two format. That will include Snowflake, and Databricks has just bought Tabular for $1 billion. And you have Amazon and Google and Snowflake and like just choose the company. All of them are going to support Iceberg. So right now we are in a point of time where the standard for how you're going to build a lakehouse is set. I've been operating in this market before there was a standard. So we've been building lakes that are queryable, but you could only query them from specific engines. And now we are doing the exact same thing, but our data is available for every warehouse engine possible. That basically really expanded our market, and we are super excited about this trend. And it's also great for the user. This is the right thing for the user to have more control over those pieces and not being locked into one specific vendor.
And you mentioned consolidation in the market there, and that combined with this increasing pace of technological change, it's breathtaking at the moment. So I'm curious if you were to look into the future, or dare to, it's moving that fast at the moment, it's almost impossible to predict anything. But how do you envision the future of data management evolving with the adoption of lakehouse architectures? What does that future look like, do you think?
So the first part that I think is already set and clear is that the open lakehouse is going to be the standard. That same survey I mentioned before is predicting 70% of enterprises running at least 50% of their analytics on the lakehouse in just 3 years. So that's a massive change that's going to happen from cloud data warehouses and on-prem data warehouses, and also from all style data lakes like Hadoop and Spark. The part that's currently being set, but hasn't been set completely, is the catalog piece. So we talked about controlling access to data. What's going to be your catalog? And the Iceberg community has created something called a REST catalog, basically allowing every vendor to create its own Iceberg catalog. And Snowflake recently launched Polaris, their open source Iceberg catalog. And I think that a lot of the companies in this market are going to standardize around one open catalog because they understand they cannot each keep their own catalog, because that defeats the purpose of creating interoperability. So what is the catalog of the future going to look like? Are the governance capability going to be open source or not? So these parts are not completely set yet. But the fact that the open lakehouse is going to be Iceberg, I feel that's pretty set.
Wow, I'd love to get you back on later in the year or early next year and see how things are continuously evolving. But I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on here, simplify things, put it in a language that everyone can understand. And I'm going to see if there's something we can do for you now, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or maybe even listened to this podcast. So is there a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with? Who would it be and why? He or she might get to hear this. Let's see what we can manifest together. Who would it be?
I think it will be Sam Altman. At what he has been doing with OpenAI. It's been amazing. And there is so much more that can be done. One of my investors told me that every time OpenAI is doing an event, 1,000 startups die because they're so innovative in what they're doing. So after the initial launch, the fact that they kept innovating in every launch is very impressive. Like the recent Super City type of product. I would be very curious on how Sam is seeing the future and what's going to happen 5-10 years from now with search engines, for example, or with other use cases. So I would go talk to them first.
Yeah, what a conversation that would be. I will throw that into the ether. Let's see what we can manifest together there. And I love that line your friend used there. Every time OpenAI hopes a venture startup dies, there's an element of truth in that. But for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more about Upsolver and explore some of the things we've talked about today, maybe connect with you or your team and got additional questions to ask, where would you like to point them?
I think the website is a great place. They can always go to our Slack channel as well to ask questions. But the best thing, you can just try the product. I mentioned that we had an ingestion product and a lake management product. If you're not already in Iceberg, go check out the ingestion product. You can build an Iceberg lake from any of your sources in about 10 minutes of work. And if you already have an Iceberg lake, go check out the management product. And basically, before you're running any type of compute in your account, there is an analyzer, and it's going to show you how much money you're going to save on storage and how much time you're going to save on query latency just by pointing to your existing Iceberg table. And our analyzer is going to spit out an answer for you in like a few seconds. You can understand what are the gains before even running a project. So a 10-minute product experience will help you understand everything much better than any website.
Well, it's been a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I'll add links to everything so people can find you nice and easily. And we covered so much there, from defining exactly what is the Lakehouse, why it's the next big thing in data, why business leaders need it, and the challenges that might stand in the way of making the Lakehouse the new warehouse, but also the great work you're doing in helping businesses along the way and navigating on that journey. But more than anything, just thank you for shining a light on this and sharing your insights. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Enjoy the session.
I think it's clear that lakehouses are poised to transform the data management landscape. But what are the next steps for businesses looking to adopt this architecture? How can they overcome the challenges in transitioning from traditional data warehouses? Cannot thank Ori enough for sharing his insights and expertise today. And for everybody tuning in, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is it that you think is the most compelling aspect of lakehouses? And how do you see them shaping the future of data management? And if you've been on a similar journey, I'd love to hear some of the lessons you learned along the way too. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, @NeilC.Hughes. Let me know your thoughts. Any questions you have for me, please fire them across too. But it's time for me to get out of here now. I've got another guest lined up for you bright and early tomorrow to prepare for. So thanks for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.